already acclaimed in boardrooms the world over, How the Deal Was Done brings together the most interesting and candid deal makers in investment history. With your host, Laura Queen, founder and CEO of 29 Bison. And now, How the Deal Was Done.
Welcome and thank you for joining us. I'm Laura Queen, founder and CEO of 29 Bison, human capital advisors to the middle market. Our guest for this episode of How the Deal Was Done is Meryl Unger, a partner and head of the corporate and business law department of Katsky Korins LLP, a boutique full-service New York law firm. In this episode, Meryl shares a David and Goliath story, similar in many ways to the business fable Patrick Lencioni wrote in his 2010 book, Getting Naked. We invite you to join us as Meryl shares her own inspired path to deal making and this fascinating story of a management buyout and the magic of a small company who built incredible value by putting clients first. If you like what you hear, please share this episode with others. Like and follow us on this channel and our social media outlets, including LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram. If you're curious about us, we can be found at 29bison.com. That's 29bison.com. Thanks again for listening. Fill up your water bottle, find a comfy chair, relax, and enjoy. Meryl, it is such a pleasure to have you with us on today's episode of How the Deal Was Done. Thank you so much for joining us.
Laura, I am absolutely delighted to be here, and thanks so much for having me.
Our pleasure. To begin today's conversation, we would love for you to share with us a little bit about your personal professional background. What is it that you do? How do you get to the place that you're in? And what is your deal-making experience?
Great. Love to share that. My professional experience actually was inspired by my father, who in the 1960s was doing international business in France. Was represented by a woman lawyer, and a woman lawyer in the 60s was quite rare. I remember he described her as smart and effective and tough as nails and a lovely person. And he said that she could run circles around the male lawyers she was dealing with. And as a child, that absolutely stayed with me. I thought that sounded absolutely fantastic. So flash forward into my first job out of law school, I joined a boutique corporate and securities law firm on Wall Street where I was the only woman. And the partners took me under their wings. I was very lucky. They encouraged me to dive into the world of corporate and securities law by continually learning and doing. And they really gave me a great opportunity to build my chops at understanding and unraveling complex situations in representing both public and private companies. They went on to make me a partner at a very young age, and it was definitely trial by fire, but I grew to love that. And then my next opportunity came at my current firm, Katsky Korins, when I was invited to join a small group of young entrepreneurial lawyers who had spun off from a prominent large Wall Street firm to form their own boutique law firm. Their mission was to provide high-quality legal work in a more collegial and personalized manner and at lower cost to their clients. And that really resonated with me. And the mentality at our firm has always been clients first, exceed expectations, and be committed to our clients' success. And several decades later, those values really continue to drive the firm, and I think they're largely responsible for our success. So I joined the corporate department, and I grew to lead the corporate and business law practice group of the firm. And in our transactional practice, we represent buyers, investors, and sellers of private companies. Then one more thing that I think has been really pivotal in my professional development. Along the way, I became actively involved in and became counsel to a leading women's business organization, the Women Presidents Organization. The WPO is sort of like a YPO for multi-million-dollar companies, and in some cases, billion-dollar companies, all of which are led by women. And for me, the entrepreneurship and the innovative thinking and the continued growth that I've experienced by actively participating in this organization has really fueled my practice. And I think it's given me an edge with my clients. It's certainly given me a deeper understanding of the issues that middle market companies are dealing with as they work to grow and scale and ultimately exit their business. And Laura, I think that understanding enables me to be a better lawyer and business advisor to my clients, whether they are buyers, investors, or sellers.
That's terrific, Meryl. Thank you. Can you share with us a bit about how you come to deal making? What is it about the deal making space that's of interest to you? What inspires you about it?
There's a lot to share there. So I think the excitement I feel from the deal making experience is a reflection of some fantastic mentors and colleagues I've had. What I learned early on about deals is it's the skills that you bring to the table as an experienced transactional lawyer that has tremendous impact on the outcome of the deal. So the complexities, the curveballs, the unexpected dynamics between the deal makers and the clients and all the nuances really require confidence in what you know you can accomplish. And all of this excites me. And I think those skills not only include having a great deal of experience in structuring and negotiating deals, but also a firm grasp of the big picture, the bigger picture, and the context of the deal. And it also requires a great understanding of some of the unspoken factors in the negotiation and each party's needs and priorities. And that's where emotional intelligence comes into play. I think it requires being comfortable being on your toes and feeling assured that you can deliver the right results. And for me, when I'm collaborating with other professionals with the same passion and zeal, really nothing beats that. But at the end of the day, what is most gratifying to me about the deal-making process is using our skills and experience to help navigate our seller and buyer clients through a successful transaction. And in many cases, what I have seen is it really can be transformational for a seller and his family and his employees to have a successful exit. And for buyers, the acquisition of the target company can create, of course, tremendous synergistic value. So for me, the real magic occurs in creating those successful outcomes.
That's fantastic. And we agree with you 100%. The challenges and the complexities of each deal and how in some ways they're similar and in most ways they're each very different from each other are the things that drives us as well. Thank you.
Yes.
So Meryl, how the deal was done is ultimately about sharing stories of our deal-making processes and experiences. I imagine with the background you have that you have some really interesting and compelling stories to share with our audience. Would you do so?
I'd love to. And I actually have a favorite story of a transaction that I like to refer to as David and Goliath, how a small business can compete with a giant in their industry and ultimately win over that giant in their industry. And this story actually involves two transactions I handled for the same client over the course of 3 years. The first was a management buyout by our client, and the second was the sale of our client to the industry giant. And our client was the 3-person management team of a small professional services company. When I first met them, they had been negotiating only with the guidance of their accountant, and they'd been negotiating their management buyout from the owner of their company. So when I met them, they told us that they had arrived at terms with the owner and that they were interviewing us along with 2 other firms to represent them. There was a bit of a beauty contest going on. And in preparing for our meeting, it became apparent to my tax partner and I that based on the deal structure, that had been negotiated, their accountant had overlooked a huge opportunity for tax savings. So at that initial interview, we described to the client the tax election that they could make to convert what otherwise would be treated as a stock sale into an asset sale, resulting in several $1 million in tax savings to them. So that nailed it. That sealed the deal. We got the client. We were hired. And I think for me, lesson one to the seller in that, to the buyer in that situation is to bring in experienced tax and transactional counsel early on during the negotiations.
Right.
And then during the course of the negotiations, one of the three principals who ran one line of their business was not in alignment with the other two principals who ran the other line of business. That is not an infrequent occurrence, that there is a breakdown among the buying partners. And it became clear to us over a relatively short period of time that the principals were not going to be able to remain in the business together. And at that point, the management buyout was really at risk of falling apart. So what we did was proceed to hammer out a solution for the two principals who asked us to continue to represent them. The third party got his own counsel. And we were able to salvage the transaction by separating out the two lines of business and structuring a tax-free split-off for our client of their line of business on very favorable terms. So lesson two for the buyers is to work with your counsel on developing alternative strategies when there are unexpected hurdles, and there are always unexpected hurdles. So moving ahead, following the closing of the buyout, our client expected, and they told us that they would continue to operate and grow their business. They thought for about 10 years. They were young professionals, and that their expectation is they would sell to one of their management team. Instead, their growth in the ensuing 2 years surpassed all of their expectations. And what they had done, Laura, was to adopt a key differentiator in their field. They developed deep knowledge of their target market, and they developed very close relationships with their customers. And they used that intimacy to their advantage. And they paid close attention, in particular, to their customers' pain points. Those things that were inconvenient or difficult or challenging for their customers. And they proceeded to develop service offerings to address those pain points. Now, their customers were actually institutional clients, and they came to adore our client for having addressed their pain points. And our client began to win RFPs from larger customers, even when they competed with giant companies in their industry. Soon those competitors began to reach out to them. And one in particular, which is a large global publicly held professional services firm, wanted to understand what was the secret sauce of this small upstart company. And then they wanted to know if the client was open to a sale. So lesson 3 is win against the odds by crafting really top-notch personalized service offerings for your customers that can distinguish you from the industry giants. I think small businesses are in a unique position to use the intimacy they can develop with their customers in a way that larger enterprises often do not.
Sure.
So I introduced the client to an investment banker who helped them navigate the overtures they were receiving from industry giants and helped them understand their value in the marketplace. And we went on to work with our client and the investment banker in identifying those characteristics that were of paramount importance to our client in selecting a buyer. The Goliath, who ended up being the successful bidder and acquired our client, had 15,000 professionals in this particular space, while our client had 35.
Wow.
And the Goliath's due diligence team consisted of 44 lawyers and business professionals, while our due diligence team consisted of a mighty 4 people. So you can see it was pretty extraordinary. But what made the deal really viable for our client was, in addition to an extremely favorable purchase price, is that the buyer, as large as it was and as institutional as it was, really valued our client's subject matter expertise. They wanted to retain our clients. They wanted to retain their staff, and they had a long-term view of growth for this business. Most of all, they presented a compelling vision of what the buyer thought the acquisition and post-closing integration could look like. And I know that's an area that you have great in-depth knowledge of and how challenging that can be. But they were able to really present a picture and a story that resonated with our client. And so I think lesson 4 that comes out of this is for the seller to understand the key attributes of what you are looking for in a buyer. So moving forward, the due diligence process went on for months. And I kept reminding our client that this is not a sprint, but a marathon. The negotiations were challenging, and there were inevitable bumps in the road. But my experience was that the professionals on both sides of this transaction were experienced and practical. And most of all, our client was really able to distinguish between the must-haves and the nice-to-haves and prioritize. And beyond that, of course, the buyer was highly motivated to make this acquisition. So the upshot of this transaction is that we were able to structure it to maximize the purchase price proceeds and minimize taxes, and particularly to limit our clients' exposure on indemnity claims in those areas of greatest risk to our client. The cash purchase price that our client realized ended up being 4 times the amount that they had paid for the business only 2.5 years earlier. And when you factor in the earnout, our client realized 5 times the amount they had paid for the business 2.5 years earlier.
Incredible.
This is a true success story. And it really was incredible. And post-closing, this is one of those situations that you don't always encounter, which is that this was a truly successful integration. The client stayed on. The buyer fulfilled all of its commitments. The vast majority of the staff stayed on. The customers stayed on. Our client was able to continue to grow, in fact, exponentially, with the various capabilities of this larger enterprise. And best of all, our client achieved the entire earnout that had been negotiated. So for me, the overall lesson, and I hope this can be the lesson for your audience, is that size doesn't matter as much as perseverance. This was clearly one of the most satisfying deals I've worked on. A little postscript to this is that one of the 2 principals has just left the company after achieving the earnout and is going to launch a new company in another non-competitive industry. And we are starting off that company by planning her exit strategy from day one. So I'm totally jazzed by that.
What an incredible story. And Meryl, I'd love to know, during the period of time between the consummation of the management buyout and the acquisition of the buyer, how connected were you to this group? What was your role with them?
a great question. They were building out their team. Although they had relatively good systems in place, they were very smart to understand that even though they had a long timeline for an exit, which turned out not to be the case, of course, they wanted to make sure to professionalize everything about their business. And where they needed extra support, they brought in extremely capable staff. They grew their customer base, as I said, through this secret sauce of really trying to find the pain points and address the pain points. We worked on professionalizing their customer contracts. We worked on all of their internal agreements. So, yes, I continued to play a role in helping them build and grow their business. And then this incredible serendipity occurred, with a very happy ending.
It strikes me very much that there is, as much as managing through the first transaction, there's sort of the finish line that you're aiming for. You need to be cognizant of all of the what next. Even if your timeline is a decade out, who knows what will happen, as in this story, in a shorter term, but being really clear up front about what it is that you do next after you cross the first finish line, because it's really not the end of the race.
That is for sure. And sort of one of my takeaways from experiences like this, where there's an unexpected buyer that pops up in the wings, is that this is a continuum. You can do a great deal to position yourself, of course, for growth, but also for the possibility of a smooth transaction on the horizon and avoiding potential pitfalls that can delay or derail the sale. So we work with our clients often on a great deal of pre-sale planning.
So incredibly important, managing through understanding what pre-sale looks like, that sell-side advising piece to get organizations and individuals ready for whatever the eventual transaction might look like.
Exactly.
As I listen to this story, I am reminded of the business fable Patrick Lencioni writes about in Getting Naked. The idea that there's this small kind of magical organization providing really significant consultative or professional services that has something that becomes a critical capability to larger organizations who, heretofore have thought that they had the magic sauce all figured out for themselves, and they realize that there's something beautiful floating around out there and that could really benefit a much larger population. So this is a great real life example of how that can play out.
Exactly. And there's a real benefit to being small and nimble and being able to pivot to what your customers really need and listening and getting to know them. So yes, lots of value and lots of great lessons learned from this.
What a fabulous story, Meryl. Thank you so much for sharing this with us.
A pleasure.
And Meryl, would you share with our audience a bit about who you as an organization are? Provide some information about who your best clients are, how folks can reach out to you if they're interested in support from you and your team.
Thank you for that. I love this opportunity. So, as I mentioned earlier, our firm, Katsky Korins, is comprised of lawyers from big law who join together to serve clients in a more collegial and intimate way. We remain committed to our mission to provide high-quality legal work. We only hire the best of the best lawyers, and we provide our services at a lower cost to our clients than they're able to obtain from the larger firms. And as I mentioned before, our core values put our clients first. We exceed their expectations, and we are completely committed to their success. And I think these values have really been the key drivers of our firm since its inception and largely responsible for our own success. While we don't have the scale of larger law firms, Laura, we do have a full service practice with offerings in corporate, litigation, real estate, tax, bankruptcy, estate planning, and matrimonial. And our office is in New York City, although our practices are global. And if we are not the right firm to do the work, we have a great referral system and great referral sources to ensure that our clients get the best possible service and the best possible advice. I think what's unique and special about Katsky Korins is that we are more than your lawyers. We really aspire to be your business advisors and partners. Your success, your goals, the things that keep you up at night, we share it all with you. And we're, I like to say, the one-stop shop for clients' business needs. And if your clients want to reach me, they can connect with me and send me a message at LinkedIn, and I would be delighted to follow up with them if they have any questions or if I can provide any information.
It has been an incredible pleasure to spend time with you. We love hearing this story, and we're so incredibly inspired by other organizations that are out there trying to make the transaction world and the deal space a better place to be, with greater outcomes for individuals and for the businesses they serve. So thank you for being a part of that community.
Really been my pleasure. I've really enjoyed this conversation.
Fantastic. So have I.